There is a moment I remember quite well in my life. I was sitting in a classroom in a country I've just moved to. The teacher put on a cartoon, and immediately the whole class erupts in excitement. Everybody is screaming, laughing, arguing about their favorite episodes or characters. They weren't just watching it, they were remembering it together. And I was there completely outside of that moment. A few students turned to me and asked, "Hey, you've seen this, right?" Calmly, but somewhat awkwardly, I said, "No, I haven't." Just like that, the conversation has moved on, unintentionally excluding me, but containing something that has been built long before I got there. I think for most of you sitting here, a similar situation happened at least once in your life. A moment where you felt excluded or out of line because you didn't share a past moment or memory with someone. For me, this moment wasn't unique. It became a pattern. For a long time, I moved quite frequently throughout my life, every 1 to 3 years. I've lived in Ukraine, Russia, Israel, United States of America, and eventually Poland. I've attended more than 7 schools, and each new move meant new systems, environments, expectations, and of course, new people. At first, I thought the biggest challenge would be to fit in, but I quickly learned how to adapt, how to introduce myself, how to observe, how to adjust the way I spoke, behaved, and even thought, depending on where I was. That wasn't the problem. The real challenge was something less visible. I didn't share a past with anyone. And that matters more than we might usually think, because connection doesn't start with deep conversations or meaningful topics. It starts with something much simpler: recognition. A shared reference or experience, moments that already happened. Same TV shows, music, jokes, those small, almost invisible things that create this sense of belonging. Those same things that make people feel understood without the need of explaining themselves. And for most of my life, I didn't have access to that. Not at one place consistently. The move that made this the most obvious was when I moved to the United States. This wasn't just a new country. It was a completely different cultural system. And for the first time ever, I couldn't even rely on my language. I spoke English, but it wasn't the English everyone else spoke, as I just wasn't as fluent. So I found myself in in a situation where I couldn't connect with people through the past, and I really struggled to connect with people in the present, right now. A few years passed. When the war in Ukraine began, I moved to Poland. Here, I believed something might change. A lot of people went through a major disruption in their life. Everyone had lost something familiar. Everyone was starting over. I assumed that this shared experience would naturally create connection. But it didn't quite happen that way. People built social circles quickly, but those circles weren't built on nothing. They were extensions of what already had existed before: shared cities, schools, mutual friends, common histories. Even in the moment of collective displacement, most people still had a past they could connect through. And I realized I didn't. Again. That's when I began to understand that my experience wasn't just about moving frequently. It was about existing outside of this shared timeline. Most people build their connections gradually, year after year, in the same place, with the same people. Their past accumulates, and that accumulated past becomes foundation for connection. Mine didn't accumulate. It reset, repeatedly, again and again. For a long time, I interpreted that as a problem, as something I was missing, as proof that I didn't belong anywhere. But over time, my perspective has changed. Not because my situation has improved, it really didn't. Even today, I still find myself in conversations shaped by nostalgia when someone asks something in the lines of, "Hey, do you remember when this or that happened?" And everyone immediately connects. Well, I just sit there awkwardly, like, sorry, not for me. That hasn't disappeared. But my understanding of it has evolved because I understood that if I couldn't connect with people through the past, I had to develop a new approach. I had to develop with people, if I had to connect with people in the present, right now. Not based on what we've both experienced before, but based on what we're experiencing now or could experience in the future. This shift became especially clear when I started university. I noticed that most people formed groups based on familiarity, shared language, culture, or background. And don't get me wrong, that's how it should be, that's normal. But my experience had trained me differently. I didn't expect connection to come from similarity, so I approached people without that assumption. And something interesting happened. I realized that connection does not require a shared past. It requires attention, curiosity, and presence. It can start from something as simple as a conversation, a moment of genuine engagement, a willingness to understand someone else's perspective without it needing to match your own. Because of all this moving around, this became my strength. While others relied on the past to connect with people, I was comfortable building common ground from nothing. This doesn't mean that the absence of a shared past disappears. I still find myself slightly outside of some situations, shaped by moments or memories I wasn't a part of. But I no longer see that as limitation, as I've come to understand something important. A shared past is not the only foundation for connection. It's simply the most familiar one. Connection can also be built deliberately, through openness, through presence, through shared experiences that begin right now and gradually become the past. And in a world where people move more than ever before, where cultures intersect and identities are less fixed than before, this way of connecting is becoming increasingly relevant. Because not everyone has a shared past, but everyone has the ability to create a shared present. So perhaps belonging is not about finding those who already understand your history. Maybe it's about finding those with whom you could create something new. Something that doesn't depend on where you came from, but on what you're willing to create together. Because in the end, the past is not something we enter, it's something we build. And some of us learn to build it differently. Thank you.